Hello. Hi, how are you everyone? Good? Yeah. Thank you for making it this evening. My name is Levine Hamlani and I'm the founder and CEO of Accelerate. I won't take too long. We're going to give it to our panelists, very excellent panelists very soon, and thank you for understanding. It's a bit of a small space, but I guess that's for intimacy. We can make sure this is a nice close-knit conversation, and we want to make it very casual. We want to make sure that a lot of dialogue happens. But I guess just to get a sense of who's here, how many of you are interested in a career in UX? Can I get a raise of hands? Most people. How many of you are currently in the UX industry or in a UX role? Okay. And how many of you have absolutely no idea what UX is? That's fine. That was me a few months ago. Listen, so a big thing that we and myself and the team believe in is that in order for UX or blockchain or artificial intelligence, whatever you have in the technology industry to become a reality, especially for Hong Kong, in that we're not just going to talk about it as buzzwords, we have to invest in the talent. We have to understand what is good, what is great, and then we can start to aspire to that. And by solving the talent shortage in these fields, which is exactly what we try and do with enterprises, with individuals through our education, we're able to hopefully make Hong Kong a more innovative city. So, like I said, I want to hand it straight to the panelists. Neil's going to be moderating. Please get a lot of good questions and discussion points to ask them later, and I'm sure they'll be the ones to tell you what's good and what's great in the UX industry. Thank you again to everyone here, and thank you again to the panelists. And Neil, go for it.
Thanks, Levine. You've already asked the first question I was going to start off with to understand the room a little bit, so that's great. So I guess now we know a little bit about everyone here and what people's interest is. What I'd like to do to start off with is just introduce the panelists. We had some slides on here, but it's not going to work, so we'll just shut all of that off. I'd like to, not for me to do it, but I'd like for everybody just to run through a little bit about who you are, a little bit of your career path, I guess, a little of your background, where you are, and a little bit about where you're going with things in terms of in a UX context, or just generally.
Thank you. I'm Alfreda. I'm currently Experience Design Director at Isobar, digital agency in Hong Kong. This is my 19th year in UX, so I'm going to try to keep this introduction short. So I'm very homegrown UX. I started 19 years ago with my UX, with my human-computer interaction masters, and it's never left UX. I started my career in the States, and then moved back to Hong Kong 15 years ago when no one knew about UX, UI, and then I have been in it all this time. So it's then my next thing upcoming. I think recently I've been really into China projects. So looking at what I've been doing for the past 15, 18 years and taking it into China has been quite interesting.
Thanks. I'm Damien. I came to Hong Kong 6 years ago to set up Cogs, which is a digital recruitment company. I've been in recruitment 14 years. I moved from marketing into recruitment. And we now specialise in delivering digital talent to organisations of all shapes and sizes. And in terms of digital, it's quite broad. So it covers everything from technology through to analytics, service design or experience design, marketing, and so forth. One of our biggest areas is UX and service and experience design. And we work quite closely as an agency with many digital communities, and I guess that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Ilya. I'm originally from Russia, Vladivostok. It's a tiny city of Far East. It's kind of like Hong Kong, very similar, but 10 times smaller every city. Rent probably 20 times smaller. I started by I was building my website when I was still at high school. As then I became like a project manager in an agency, and I was changing roles quite a bit I was studying design between designer, project manager, and then I became like a lead of the team. And it iterated many times until I kind of recognized that basically my passion is to make sure a product makes sense, adding value. And this led me to user experience design first, and now my title is product manager. I'm working in Hong Kong for the last 5 years. and currently I'm working at Lynk. It's a knowledge network. Okay, enough about myself.
Hi everyone, I'm Homaxi. I currently live and work in Australia, which is where I've lived for the last 40 years. My path to this industry was through mainstream advertising. That's what I used to do. And I got into what we now call UX, probably about 18 years ago. I've been doing this. Started out as a practitioner, UX designer, and that's what I did for a while. And then sort of slowly but fast, I guess, somehow moved further up the chain more towards UX strategy. And that's what I've been doing. So then I started focusing more on building capabilities, managing teams, that sort of thing. I wasn't so much on the tools anymore. And I did my own consulting for a while as well. So I've worked in-house, in corporate, I've worked in agencies and consultancies, and I've also done my own direct freelancing for about 5 years. And for the last couple of years, I've been focusing very much on global roles. So in experience design, looking at what companies are doing very much across Asia predominantly, but a little bit in Europe as well, South America, and I'm helping companies elevate their UX practice, whatever elevate means, but yeah, helping companies elevate their UX practice. And yeah, mentoring people and educating and coaching.
Okay, great. Actually, we've got another microphone, so maybe I'll hang on to this one and you guys can pass that one around. Great. So we've got 4 quite varied and very experienced panelists with different backgrounds, and that's no coincidence. It was a deliberate plan to try and bring in a little bit of variety of experience. What I can't show you, I had it running on a slideshow earlier, is my mini research experiment. I asked all of the panelists to list out their 5 most critical knowledge, skills and attitudes that they felt were most important for a UX designer, and that instantly threw up lots of problems. How do you define knowledge and skills was one major one. Attitudes was a lot clearer, so we got some good feedback from that. As Living mentioned, I have a list of questions here which I'll run through as a rough guide, but if anybody's got any questions that come up as a result of the discussion, we very much want this to be an open session, so please just wave, throw something at me, whatever you want to do just to get my attention, and I'll pass.
Do you want to introduce yourself now?
Not really.
Off to a great start.
Yeah, my background is actually not in UX. My background is in experience design, spatial and interactive experience design. But it's all interconnected and interrelated. And one thing, from my perspective, I would say is UX crosses a lot of boundaries. Experience design crosses over into many different areas, and you can see that from the panelists here already. That they're all working in a lot of different ways in a lot of different areas. So don't think that when you think of UX, don't think of it in a narrow way that it's purely only digital content. You can transfer that over. Personally, I've been taking UX methodologies over into spatial experience design as well to help transform visitor experiences. So anyway, I don't want to talk about me. So one of the key questions that came up when I tried to go through this introduction was, how do you define UX, and particularly how do you split UX and UI? Can you? Should you? So where are the boundaries between UX and UI? Let's start with that.
I guess I'll always be
I'm giving you the mic.
UX UI, that's a $1 million question. I think that has always been difficult, especially with the advent of user experience in the past few years. We all of a sudden have everybody calling themselves UI designers, everybody calling themselves UX designers. So you get lots and lots of resumes that say they're UX designers, but it's not exactly what you're looking for. And even when we put out job ads that says UX or UI designers, people get really confused about what you're looking for as well. So yes, my answer would be it is important to make that distinction. If only for just to let the other person know that you know what you're talking about. I think that's very important. But once you get past that, it's things that are extremely two disciplines that are extremely intertwined, and that's why I think there's a lot of confusion even within the industry. Even within, it's a very personal definition, I think, and it's very difficult to define, I think, as a standard.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think what's important is to not box people into silos, and ultimately a title should be indicative of the role that someone needs to play. So I sit in a few digital communities through WhatsApp and forums as a silent observer, and I just watch the interaction between domain professionals debating topics just like this. And some people have really strong views on the separation between UI and UX, and they should be two independent skill sets. But actually, I think it really depends on the demands of a business or the needs of a business. So when you're working with a startup that's lean and has limited resources, there is a need to bring in a hybrid that could sit across both UX and UI, or even be titled an interaction designer. And that doesn't mean to say that someone can't be an expert on both sides of that fence. It just means that they are fulfilling that role because the business dictates they do so. And likewise, when you're dealing with enterprise level clients who tend to have a much more, I guess, a defined or refined role that someone needs to play, well then a very specific title might be more indicative of what that person will do on a day-to-day. But there shouldn't be a kind of a standard. I think businesses need to keep an open mind, and as does talent.
So the question was how we define it, right? We had this conversation with the guys just when I joined here, and I think one of the aspects of it is that UX is all about researching and all about egoless. When design is all about your feeling of style, understanding, trend, expression. Like designer have some freedom, UI designer as well, to follow the trend and say like, hey, this is what I'm interested in. UX designer, on the other hand, from my perspective, need to be significantly more rigorous in research and significantly egoless. So idea would be to take some audience and try to understand how they perceive the world instead of enforcing your taste on people. So for me, I'm probably one of these guys who have like very opinionated about this topic, right? So for me, UX UI the designer is a little bit of internal conflict, right? I think it's a good role to have UX researcher on the team, if it's possible, if your budget allow, to have someone focus specifically on UX research. It doesn't mean this person should not be a designer, it just means this person focus and approach should be significantly more science-driven, experiment-driven, duration, and then like creativity needs to be in a design and experiment instead of jumping to a conclusion and building a solution first. Yes. Try it. It's
So yeah, I kind of agree with you, Ilya, but just to build on it a little bit, the way I like to think about it is when we're building design solutions or whatever it is we're building, we all talk about useful and usable. And to me, UX is very much about making sure we're building the right thing. We're making sure it's a useful thing. There is a need for it, or there is an opportunity, there is a problem we're trying to solve, which goes to somewhere towards your research, right? You need to consult with your potential customer. Whereas the UI is a little bit more about making whatever it is you're building usable. So the two definitely are complementary. They have to go together. I agree, I think pretty much with the panel that there is, the best scenario is for there to be a hybrid capability, because I don't think you can demarcate between one and the other. It's not about a UX, developing a UX strategy and then throwing it over the fence to a UI designer to go build, design the solution to work on it. So I think another way of looking at it is UX strategy and UX design, making sure something's useful and then making it usable. For me, the distinction then comes with visual design. For me, that's Am I jumping ahead?
That's my next question.
Yeah, to me that's the big distinction then about actually what is visual design. So the visual design to me is very much about making sure it is appealing, attractive, it's on brand. And again, the visual design it needs to complement what the UX design is, because if it doesn't, a wonderful UX design, a wonderful UX strategy can all go down the drain. So all of these are very important, but I think UX and UI go well together, and I wouldn't even see them as a separate distinction now. I think they have to go together, and hybrid is the way to go.
Yeah, so that does touch on my next question, really, in terms of background, suitable background for people. Obviously, we have a variety of different backgrounds already in this panel in terms of coming from UX, but maybe not. It's quite common for UX designers not to come from a visual design background. So, in what sense is it useful, or is it a hindrance to have a visual design background if you're going to go into UX? Migrating through that spectrum in a way. Damien, you touched on this briefly when you talked about startups and small organizations needing a kind of more complete design capability.
When you say background, is this working? Background? Technology. It really depends. So, when you say background, do you mean academic background or experience? Or either. Yeah, look, I don't think it really matters. It comes down to the individual. It's about aptitude, competence, your ability to learn quickly. Obviously, if you're a graduate and you're coming from a particular academic background, that will, in essence, align with certain paths. So, if you want to move into UX research or strategy, then a cognitive studies, cognitive science, behavioural science, academic background might be preferred. And of course, if you're actually working in design, there's a strong visual element, so that's part you want to take when you need to be able to design. So you would expect academia in that. But in terms of experience, I don't think it's a hindrance to be from visual and want to become a UX strategist. And frankly, to come from a sort of UX research and maybe if you have the design ability, move into a much more kind of UI-led path. It just comes down to the individual.
I don't know. I met people who didn't have visual arts background or design background and actually great UX researcher or UX designers nowadays. So I think it's not necessary. I found it often that people do need to have significantly more rounded experience in life before they become kind of oriented towards this value. And I need to have this, I probably repeat myself, but need to have this approach when they capable to say like, hey, it's not about me, it's not about us, it's about you users, and we need to understand what is it, how you perceive the work, what is driven you, so that we can understand how to create experience for you instead of what we like. Yeah, this is, for me, this is fundamental and much more important than background, right?
Yeah, I think visual designers coming into UX is actually a really natural transition. I teach quite a lot, and a lot of my students are people in visual design wanting to become UXers. And but that's the distinction between visual design and just straight out graphic design. Because even in digital platforms or software, a visual designer should never be just painting, right, with a visual scheme. What they are doing in terms of the color, the brand palette, icons, a whole lot of elements that visual designers work with, as I said earlier, can either make or break all the work that has gone in ahead of that. So visual design, I think, Damien, like you said, should be, it has the power to influence. So whatever techniques you're using, whether it's thinking about, cognitive psychology or it's behavioral, but it has the power to influence how people are experiencing that software that you've actually created. So to me, that's actually a very logical transition. And I think if the visual designer is coming at it from the right mindset, then for them it's really easy. However, I think it's hard for people to go the other way, for UXers to become visual designers, because there's a whole technical skill that goes with visual design as well, that UXers typically don't have.
Yeah, I'll add to that, especially what last time Mr. Homaxi was was talking about, I've always wished that I'd be better at the visuals. So I value that skill a lot as a UXer, and that's absolutely right. It's much more difficult to kind of go the other way. Started as a UXer, kind of that visual piece is kind of out of my reach now. So I think I value a lot in that experience. However, I've also seen it in some people where they had that graphic design or visual design background, and it became a hindrance because they couldn't have their mind open to be beyond that surface level of making it attractive, making it, and so I think it's very much down to the individual and kind of the mindset to be a UX less so on the background that you have, but how you apply basically what you have as your educational background or as your professional background and expand into it.
I have one more thing to add to that actually. So there isn't, I think it also becomes a hindrance for the job seeker when they are experienced within one profession and they're trying to transition into something new. So if you're a visual designer with no previous hands-on UX work and you've taken an academic program, you've been involved with some pro bono projects, but you haven't actually worked on any commercial projects that have gone to market in a real commercial environment, well, it becomes a hindrance then when you're trying to apply for experienced or for roles that require experience in that particular field. So it's tough, it's challenging, but I think you also need to be realistic about some of the feedback that you might get from organisations that are looking to hire specific skill sets or types of experience.
Great. I think we can dip back into that again afterwards, a little bit later on in terms of the some of these values and capabilities and how design in a way can get in the way of where you can become too focused on elements and not be able to detach yourself from the user experience itself and designing something, creating something, but we'll come back to that a bit later on. So I just wanted to touch on in terms of somebody starting out so early in their career, what are the real essentials? What's the minimum to get started as a career in? Damien, you might want to start this one off. So, what's the minimum that you need to get your foot in the door, and what can or should you be learning on the job?
I guess again. Look, it's really hard when you're at entry level to have a comprehensive portfolio to showcase to employers. I think what's important is when you are reaching the latter part of your academic course to try as best you can to be involved with as many projects as possible, which will give you the experience that you require. So, and that can be done through interning, free or paid. It can be done by exercises like this where you're amongst UX professionals and you get the opportunity to meet with people that will be open to you being involved with their projects or at least getting exposure to their projects. I believe that trying to get as many case studies or pieces of work in your portfolio that have been projects that have gone live, they've had real end users, it's not purely theoretical or just prototypes that are of course are part of a kind of a dissertation or an academic submission. That's definitely advantageous, but fundamentally it just comes down to the individual and their attitude and their soft skills and their aptitude and so forth.
To add to that?
Things to add to. As Damien said, I think for me as a hirer, sometimes even if that portfolio, I guess the only thing that I would say different to Damien is that in that portfolio, if there is academic work that hasn't actually been something that's been created for real end users, to me that's still enough. And of course, we're talking about junior entry level roles here, because in a portfolio, what I want to look for is the fact that people have actually practiced. They've practiced. It doesn't matter what they're developing. I'm looking for the fact that they can talk to their designs, they can explain the rationale, They can talk intelligently about what they've tried, what they've thrown away. So in a portfolio, we were looking for what have people rejected and discarded. And if it is something that's been created for an NGO, or if it is something that's been created for a pet project or something free that was done, it doesn't matter. It's about being able to talk to your work and being able to explain the rationale for your design and how you created it. And 100%, as Damien said, it's the attitude and it's the soft skills. Because the other stuff can be taught, but coming in with those right realistic expectations as well, empathy, curiosity, all the sort of stuff that we're going to talk about with soft skills, that's the critical stuff, I think, that you must have. And then it doesn't hurt to have a really key ability like prototyping or some hard skill that you can bring to the table as well.
I think this is a perfect answer. I just want to add a little bit. Like the way we interview, usually we asking designers to tell a story about how it's like portfolio can look interesting, but then you're asking these questions and trying to understand how you come about this solution, what was the problem, and this story is usually what you look into in a potential UX designer. You want to understand how the process is structured, and I think this thinking. You can evaluate at a very early stage. Like you can find topics to discuss, to find like, even without necessarily high profile work, you can find some project in person demonstrated capacity to think through and do research and show you what it means to actually create a better product eventually.
Okay, great. I'll move on. I think this is a question, because we're doing all right, actually. Okay, so one of, in the feedback I got from the panelists, one of the critical responses in various different forms was communication as a soft skill, being able to communicate. So I'd like to try and dig a little bit deeper into that. Can you talk a little bit about what communication skills in your work?
I think the most underappreciated quality of communication is that before communication starts, you need to be able to shut up when you listen. And this step is a crucial one. People usually miss this one. I miss it all the time. I think for me, my personal development was going kind of against my nature to talk too much.
That's very, very true. I think communication represents itself in so many different ways, but still for a lot of people, especially when you're working with your clients, they don't understand what is this process of user-centered design, what is human-centered design. So I think the key responsibility of any UXer is to demystify that process, being able to communicate about it. Like you said, storytelling is the best word for it. And you need to be able to identify who it is you're talking to. You need to be able to speak their language. Is it a product person? Is it a developer? Is it somebody who's concerned about innovation? Is it somebody who doesn't trust your research process? So you need to be able to identify really quickly and speak to them and communicate with them in the language that means something to them. The other thing about communication is really being aware of how much time and how much appetite your audience has, right? So are you in a 3-hour presentation workshop? How are you going to structure that? Whereas, if you've happened to jump into the lift with a CEO or somebody who's the sponsor of your project, you've got 60 seconds to tell them what you're doing and how it's going to actually help them and give them some ROI. So every opportunity is important, but it's about being able to identify what that opportunity is and who that opportunity is with.
Or you have 60 seconds to listen.
I'm looking at this from a recruitment perspective. So when we meet designers, really the communication skill is important in being able to communicate your ideas. So when we're looking at a portfolio, being able to create that story, that narrative. So I guess in essence it's the same as engaging stakeholders or your clients when you're working. But being able to talk step by step through the problems that you were trying to tackle and the solution that you designed or developed is critical. The who's, the what's, the why's, the when's, the how's, and ultimately what the end result is.
I'll come in from the agency perspective. So we deal with clients a lot. Communication was really big on kind of my needs when Neil was asking, and that is kind of one of my key gauge of seniority actually. So we were talking about junior positions versus senior UXers, And a lot of times it's not down to like a wireframe is a wireframe, a design is a design when you look at a portfolio. But that level of communication that you can direct when talking to your interviewer or when my team is talking to the clients or when they're talking to the other parts of the, talking to other teams, communicating what they would like to get in terms of questions or answers or how do they work with the rest of the teams. Those are all parts of the communication skills that you need to have. And that, to me, that defines a lot of, a big part of how senior you are. So I put a lot of gauge on that quality, and it's when we say, you know, if we bring in senior designers or we bring in senior consultants, a big part of that was, can they communicate with the client? Can they communicate with the client without someone more senior holding their hand? Can they take that client or take the rest of the team on their own? And that kind of defines it. So that's why communication is very important to me.
Can you listen?
Yes, exactly what we want to do. You know, 5 years ago my English was really terrible, and I was sitting in the audience on events, and I had a huge anxiety. I had a question, but I also had a bubble anxiety, and I never asked a question. So I would like to encourage someone who have a question already to come forward and maybe ask a question, because we really want it to be a dialogue.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hi. My name is Nick. I actually have a follow-up questions about communications and how do you cultivate that in design? So, you know, like if you're just training for UI design, you could get some projects, maybe build a website and just train that. If you're looking for user research, you could do some case studies. But for communication, how do you cultivate that?
Very difficult question to answer.
Oh, sorry, my phone. I didn't make that. My phone made that stupid noise. I couldn't shut it off.
I think the phone had a question.
That's
Anxiety bubble now.
That's a bad user experience. The designer didn't think about that. What if the user is in a meeting like this? This is embarrassing. So please blame on Xperia, not me. Sorry.
No worries. So cultivating communication is practice. It's difficult to practice in front of a mirror. So a lot of that does come with experience, unfortunately. But then it starts with working internally, I think. So it's not just communicating with kind of external clients when there's a lot more pressure. You communicate with your peers. You communicate with your family. One of the things with UX is that I've been in the industry for 18 years. My family still doesn't know what I actually do. It's a very difficult thing to communicate. So if you can succeed at that, you're like halfway there already. I think it's practice. It's also practicing kind of how you. In the case if we're looking at, let's say, if you want to try to get a job, let's say. Is practicing that spiel. How can you put across that you are a good communicator? There will be a story that you would want to tell. There will be a story about your work. There will be a story about your experience. Even the most junior person would have experiences to tell, and the most junior person could be the best communicator out there. So it's not on this front. There's nothing about skills. Again, nothing about what you have. It's about preparing, and it's about also stepping outside of yourself and listening to the story you're telling, and being critical about the story that you're telling.
I want to add to that actually. I think communication skills are what I would call partly will, partly skill. So someone may be a good communicator, but if they're not in the environment where they're encouraged to communicate, they never will. But fundamentally, in all businesses, it comes down to good leadership. So if you have a team or people that you're mentoring you need to be inclusive of them regardless of how going forward or forthcoming they are. And I think empowering people to have a voice is really, really critical to get the best out of them. And I see in a lot of businesses that's not always the case, but it certainly should be.
Totally agree. It's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I think proper agile process, right? Is it one of the this agile story is this 4 principles, and one of the principles is individuals first. Individuals, I forgot about over what, but it doesn't matter. Individuals, right? Individual members of this cross-functional team communicating clearly to each other. This is a fundamental principle. So how do you do that as a manager? You make a stand-up, a place where people can share and communicate clearly and very short. It's actually very difficult to do, right? So you train people on a daily basis in communication. You coach them if they fail. You create this flow of communication. And then communication is not only about talking, it's actually not at all about talking, it's mostly about what people understood after you spoke, right? So this aspect of it is very important because sometimes people stand up and formally read the list and you kind of like, what you just communicated. Like you just read the list of committees or maybe some code stuff. Nobody understood you. What is the point? So this training, daily training, I think it's amazing. It's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is a quality of documentation. We talk about documentation within the company. This is critical aspect. And unfortunately, like I saw in companies in Hong Kong, I saw a lot of kind of lacking of this, right? This idea that the reason why your company exists, the reason why your product exists, architecture, all of this must be documented in a way which is readable. Not just formal specifications for your clients or outsource people. Internally, like what about you communicating clearly through documentation, what is it your company all about? What are we doing here? And again, how you can help others to engage in that. I think internally in a few previous companies I worked with, we're using this tool called Quick. And one of the core idea of this is that you can easily link documents together and easily comment and engage people. There's a lot of tools like that. Another one is Notability, I think. There's a few like that. So I would recommend to try to use this kind of stuff as well.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I would recommend putting yourself in safe, low-risk, uncomfortable positions. As soon as you're out of your comfort zone, that's when you have to really call on your communication skills to deal with whatever it is that's going on. And yeah, like someone I think on the panel said, it's up to your leaders. It's, you know, and if they're not giving you that opportunity, then go and ask for it and find out where those opportunities are and place yourself in there. Because if you're not in that uncomfortable position, it's that practice of learning on the fly how to communicate when and how, with whom, in what language. And if you can't do it, then at least be present in the room where that dialogue is going on, so that after the event you can have a conversation about, well, how could we have done that differently, or what was the gap in communication? Why were we not able to get our messaging across? But it is about finding those safe, you know, low risk opportunities. But yeah, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, that's the best way, because that's when you need to call on your knowledge of the technique or the method, or is it something political that the conversation is going on? Then you have to understand the agenda that the person is speaking to you with, and then you find the right ways to respond. I was doing a big piece in the Philippines for a bank, and we had a 3-hour presentation workshop on our work, and we had a number of slides, and I had my junior with me, and the junior was going to do all the introduction and, you know, set the scene, all the easy stuff. This is what we did, here's the research, blah blah blah, before we got into the really challenging messages we had to deliver. And 3 slides in, the president of the bank said, that's all wrong, that's all rubbish. And what he was seeing on the screen was really what his staff members had said to us as part of the research and consultation process. So the poor junior kind of looked at me like this, like, as you would. But then it was really about saying, okay, how do we have this dialogue now? What is this person's blocker, and how do we work around it? So we had to obviously pivot the whole rest of the session and find the right way to communicate our message to him, otherwise he was just going to shut down.
Can I add or ask? Yeah, very quickly. So, why don't we mention about empathy there? Because of communication.
That's my next question.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yeah, I'm happy you. Yeah, we've known each other for a long time. Yeah. Yeah, what I was trying to touch here is that, okay, communication is not about like preaching or being a very good lecturer, a very good presenter. It's not that you can give a very good pep talk, but it doesn't mean much as long as what has been received from the other side. So I think it's mostly about empathy, so to whom you're delivering to. If it's a C-suite situation, you've got to be careful, and not juniors maybe at the front line. So, and even so, maybe if something is wrong happening, crisis, and then how to, okay, why he's saying that. So let's empathy with him. Okay, so he has other concerns, he has no time for BS. All right, then, okay, we have to relax and just try to go with his flow or their flow. So empathy and communication, I think they're so into each other. So we cannot think that, okay, we're designers and this is true, this is how it has to be. Maybe it is so, but how you deliver is more important, more than what you deliver, what you say, I reckon. So maybe we can touch it. So please, yeah, carry on with the empathy bit, please. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, well, the three major attitudes that came up from the panelists were empathy, open-mindedness and curiosity, and I think they're all in some way interrelated. So yeah, touching on that point, super important. There shouldn't be any situation where things do go wrong, and there shouldn't be any situation, I think, where you can't learn from the experience and adapt and kind of bring things back in line to understand where someone's coming from, to be able to redirect so that you can get back on the same path with them. So has anybody got any more interesting examples in terms of, you know, how empathy, open-mindedness or curiosity are applied, you know, and stories really? I think the examples would be really great if you have any. Alexi?
I have a very short and very funny one, I think. I think it was 10 years ago we were hiring a position and we received a CV and the whole CV was in caps lock. Like all of it. And we were joking about this person probably crazy or something. And we still look at the interview and I have a fight with I work with my brother and he was saying like, I want to interview this person. and we have interview and she ended up being one of the best we ever hired. And she was not able to answer why she decided randomly to put it all in caps lock. So we never knew what was the reason. But just this kind of say like, okay, maybe something not good. Like, especially I was a designer, so for me it was like, why she's screaming? Why like? Right? But it turned out that in reality, she's a very good communicator, and she was very, very helpful with our progress. So for me, the story was quite interesting later in life to look at these candidates who look a little bit off interviews them and actually discover a completely different person from what you see on the CV.
Yes.
No.
So I guess the biggest time probably in my career when empathy for users is obvious, right? That's the whole practice of user-centered design. But thinking a bit more internally, the point in my career where I had to draw on empathy the most was when Agile came in. And when I worked in Melbourne, the company I worked for, we were one of the first to really execute Agile, big development team, and trying to fit design into Agile, especially in those early days when no one understood the frustration, was just horrendous. And I guess it was just really slowly chipping away to understand where the developers were coming from. You know, when a business case gets signed off today, and then you've got 12 developers sitting down there saying, give me stories, give me wireframes, and of course you haven't done any of your research or insights, you've got nothing to give them with confidence. Instead of getting angry and having this kind of really tense battle, it was all about understanding where the business was coming from, where the development team was coming from, and where the product team was coming from. Because if we didn't treat things with respect, and for me, empathy in that sense goes very hand in hand with respect. It was about understanding the other disciplines and what was driving their motivation, and then slowly working through it together. And it still took a better part of, Andrew was there at that time too. It was like, 12 months. It was very, very painful and slow process, 10 years. We're just in there now. Yeah. But that was a big challenge. And UX does that, right? UX creates this healthy tension within a business, with product, with development, with all these practices that we have to work closely together with.
I was only going to say that I wouldn't recommend writing a CV in caps lock. But the chances of getting an interview is pretty slim.
Send it to me.
That's a wild card.
I'll do the same story in terms of clients. We talked about job seekers, we talked about internal teams. From a client perspective, you sit in the meeting and you'll have these clients that gives you the stupid ideas, right? You sit there and you go. But then I think the way to tackle this is that that's when kind of your open-mindedness and your empathy kicks in. So you don't your first reaction will be what idea, how did you come up with that? Is completely kind of out there and it's completely ugly. But then the next question is absolutely all the time is so I heard you, and why did you want that? Why did you want this big red button in the middle of the page? So very often you'll have to force them into that why, and that's when, as a UXer, that is kind of the core job as a user experience professional, is to find out the why, and that's kind of a lot of times what one of our first questions in response to everything, right? It's a very easy question, is why? Why do you want that? Why would that's to the designers, to the clients, and that's always helps us with kind of the next step once you understand that why. And that goes back to the empathy and the open-mindedness.
Yeah, great. So I think that's a big takeaway, is that obviously it's not just understanding the user, but it's understanding the whole stakeholder network and being empathic with everybody involved in creating. Does anybody have any questions within that topic area at all? Chance to break open a bit.
I've just got one question. I probably don't need a mic. I noticed that UX and user-centered design and design thinking are all terms that are being bandied around at the moment. What's the difference?
What's the three again? What's the three? Design thinking, user-centered design,
and human-centered design and UX. I'm just trying to, because I'm new, sort of relatively new to UX. I've been doing it for the last 16 months. Baptism of fire kind of thing. And I really enjoy it, but I go to design thinking meetups and things, and I'm just trying to get my head around, what does this all encompass? You know, when you say you're UX and then you see, let's say, a job for user-centered design, then does that apply to you, or is this some other new skill that I need to be getting, or?
I can try, but then it's sort of absolutely wrong. Not wrong. I think you're going to get 10 different answers from this panel alone. For me, I try to tackle the easier one would be user-centered design. Well, when I think user-centered design, it will be it's a process of, it's what the word means, right? Is your design centered around users, which is the same as human-centered, which is not the same as human-centered design. Being design centered around humans, right? So user experience, I think I see as this larger field. It's kind of it's this big circle around all these different words that gets thrown around. Design thinking is another thing, another two words that gets thrown in, I think, to sell to kind of the wider business world. And you get, I started out I started out with, I think, the user interface and there's user experience. Now we drop the user, it becomes experience design, and it's all in our heads. And it's in our different heads that the definition is different. So, Damien, what would be your definition?
Well, I'm not a domain expert, so I'll go into it. But actually, it brings me on to a very, very similar train of thought. So I want to kind of jump at the back of your question. And actually, my question is for the panel, since you are the experts. I think design as a nomenclature is a minefield, particularly when it comes to titling. And if you're looking to move or pursue a career within the design realm, or you're already within the design realm, and you're looking to just move forward, it can be incredibly difficult to position yourself in the right way. And three key design titles that are commonly used by most businesses. There's a lot of disparity between who and which they use. Is UX design, UX designer, service designer, and experience designer. How do you distinguish between the three of those? Sorry.
You probably have the best answers.
I don't say they're the best answers, they're my answers. To answer your question first, honestly, I don't think there is any different. All of them, it's a mindset, and they're all just called different things. The core part there is about building a product or a service or software or whatever it is, user up instead of business down. Obviously, we say that whatever a UX designer or a design thinker is doing ultimately has to consider the business lens as well. If you're good at what you do, it's about feasibility, viability, as well as the customer voice. But yeah, it's a mindset, and all those mindsets are keeping the end user, human customer, at the center of that. So it's building the product from them up rather than business down. I remember it was about a year ago, 15 months ago, I saw a Harvard Business Review magazine, and it was all about design thinking, the new way. I thought, oh, okay, let me see what HBR is saying, because this is going to be interesting. And I read the article and I practically fell asleep, because I thought this is what we've been doing in the industry for so long. So it's just jargon, it's the buzzword, and it's what we, I guess, the industry likes to do every now and then. And to that same point with service design, it's to me, the layers are actually UX, CX, service design, and experience design. And to my definitions, is my definition? Is it textbook? I don't know, it's my definition, I'll say, because user experience is about thinking about how your user is going to interact with one particular piece of the puzzle. So the example I like to use is a form. If you're designing a web form, you're thinking about how is the user going to interact with that form, how is it going to be seamless, quick, intuitive, less errors, blah, 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 whether they're filling out that form, let's say in a mobile app or in a website. Customer experience is thinking more about every single touch point and channel that your customer is engaging with you through. So in the example of the form, you're thinking about what is the customer's experience if they're filling out that form in a branch, or if they're filling it out digitally, or if they're filling it out by calling a call center and there's a support person on the other end filling the form out for them. To me, that's customer experience. Service design, on the other hand, is thinking about all of the business processes that's lying behind that form. So what's affecting how that form is created, entered? Do we actually have so much information about the customer that they don't even need to fill out that form? How can we actually make that a smoother process for them? And then experience design is a tricky one, actually, Damien. I think experience design is somehow wrapped around all of that. That is, in a way, one of these new buzzwords. You know, transdisciplinary designer is the other one that I've heard coming up. And I think that starts to move more into maybe spatial design as well. That one I'm still trying to figure out myself. But I think it moves beyond any of those other normal channels into spatial as well.
Can I butt in here, because coming from a spatial design background, and I've seen Cheryl's map of this, and it's in a way it's a question of scale. So you're dealing with UI, UX, and then it gets blurry. Experience design and service design, in a way, you put one inside the other. I'm not so sure. I mean, I would put service design on the outside, encompassing everything and anything in terms of the business and the customer interaction and the whole service system. And that's the other one, isn't it? System design is another. It's a massive terminology that overlaps in every possible way.
I think it is very important to understand that language is just a tool, and it's a limited tool, and it's a evolving tool all the time. So there's not such thing as a love, or not just physical thing as, so there's a table, right? And even this word table in English is quite funny because it could be a spreadsheet as well, right? So we're using words all the time. It's just a symbol, that's it.
Sorry, I wanted to add to that real quick.
Sure.
So like the panelists, as the panelists mentioned, so the scope of the responsibility in regards to the design is sort of, affects the terminology that's used, but then also the industry in which it's applied. So for example, human factors is another industry is another term that's out there, but that's typically more of an industrial application. So you're thinking things like, factories, like how is a workflow of a factory, designed and thought through so that you're reducing human errors and, protecting people's worker safety, things like that. And then UX, to me, is sort of the more sort of consumer digital products application of that. So the philosophy and the ethos behind all these different titles is a shared philosophy, but the way it's applied into what industry and then the scope, is kind of what factors into why it's so, it sounds so different. But the key here is to find out sort of where, if you're looking at, all these job descriptions, like, well, where did it come from? Right, try to talk to the people who, can you find out where are they coming from, where is the company coming from? And then the other thing that affects the scope of responsibilities is how big or small a company is. So when I started, I was a generalist. I was an experienced design, we called it specialist, but it was a generalist. So we had to do all these different functions that at a larger company, they would actually specialize out different roles. So that's another thing to consider too.
Great. Okay, so there's a never-ending spiral of semantics that we could get stuck into all night, and maybe we'll push this on a little bit. So some of the other, actually, one thing I noticed from the feedback I got, most of the skills that you came back with were soft skills, and maybe that's something you can touch on a little bit when we talk about this next section. I'm interested in getting some of your ideas. Or some of your stories really about how, because research and reframing of problems came up as big soft skills for UX. And I'd like to try and maybe pick up on some of the stories of how you've taken research, you've reframed ideas to impact projects. It's actually two different things I'm rolling into one. So I mean, pick one: research or reframing ideas, either or.
This is not an example. This is a reframing example. It's not one that I worked on, but it's probably one of the best examples I've come across. There is a company, I think it's called American Life Insurance. Not sure. My parent company overseas did this particular project, and like happens in most instances, the client came to the company and said, we want a new website. There wasn't much more of a brief behind that, and we went out and did some, when I say we, it's the parent company, right, not me. We went out and did some research on it and started to understand what is the whole sentiment going on behind life insurance. What are the drivers, the motivations, the fears, all those sorts of juicy things that you do in formative research. And they went through the process and found out a whole lot of stuff, but ultimately they reframed the problem in terms of dreams, the dreams that adults actually have. So it's not about tapping in somewhere and then getting an estimate and then doing some kind of financial calculation. It's about dreams and protecting your dreams. So they actually came up, and you can Google this, it's online. They came up with a campaign called Kid Coach, and Kid Coach, yeah. And essentially they built it out into a whole campaign, but the core of it was that they got kids in to come in and interview adults. And they did, of course, they spent a lot of time pairing the kids and the adults really well. But the kids basically interviewed the adults to find out what their dreams and aspirations were. And then what happened along the way. Why weren't their aspirations coming through? Why did they end up in some kind of 9-to-5 job that they weren't really happy with? And this reframed that entire opportunity. And then from that, they built the website, they built a campaign, they did marketing, they did the whole lot. But it absolutely tugged at the whole aspect of being financially secure, so that then you can pursue your dreams and get that enjoyment from life, rather than just about taking out a policy to protect the next generation or whatever your driver may be. And it was hugely successful. So you can Google it, the case study is up there.
My example would be something from my career. I spent like 5 years building a ERP system. It was a system in logistics space, helping companies to operate few customs and a lot of traffic, right, and, from one country to another mostly. And at some point I was very young and I was very stupid. I was trying to implement everything with technology. So I was using a system to build up all the processes need to be digitalized. And in one case, when we look at the workflow, we realize that we can add a little bit of, basically we can take already existing data, put it in a system, and cut through and make a significantly better experience. It was great. But in another case, it was a lot of effort, and the effort, all of the effort was to replace a written at a journal. And there was this old lady, she was making the journals, and all the employees come at some point, put the documents, sign, and she was looking at them. And my naive approach was to try to put all of that in digital. And what I missed completely at the time is that this process, extremely personalized process of her looking at them and them signing, this is exactly the point of quality assurance. And when you replace that with digital, the whole thing was break up. It was never, like, we never managed to actually to move on from this paper journal. And I come to appreciation of it, and I realize it is actually very, very important sometimes to find this point of human interaction and keep them, maybe even reinforce them. Like, at that point, like, from my naive kind of designer developer background, I was like, hey, everything better than a digital. No, it's not. In this specific case, it was better to print a journal, put it on a table, make people come over, put documents and sign. And this process was established for years. It was very, very human, very, very basic, but it was actually crucial for the whole workflow. And the quality was significantly higher when it was established. I failed in this case to recognize it at first. And then for me, I guess it was one of the pivotal moments when I realized that kind of what we call today user experience design is that this is significantly bigger than just like UI and technology. It's all about what we are as humans are, right? How we perceive reality, how we verify ourselves, how we see each other in eyes of others, right? This is where it happens. This is where actual connection happens. Yeah. That's it.
I'll talk to that in terms of research skills. The reason why research is so hard is because you are, why it is a skill is because you are reframing the problem for your user. And that's why you need skills and experience to do that. So when we're doing research, you don't ask users, what do you want on the website? What would help you? Which one do you like better? You never ask those questions. What you ask is, what do you do when you first wake up? What breakfast do you have? Where do you have breakfast? How do you make it? How do you take the pen? Who do you make breakfast for? And then you go throughout the day with your topic to try to find out what your user or your target audience would be doing in their daily lives, and you try to reframe that to your problem, to the problem that you are trying to solve. So I think that's where the reframing comes in. It's about reframing it for your users. It's about reframing the questions and the answers for your clients. It's less so about just, the skill comes in where we're not asking direct questions. We're asking kind of questions that seemingly is unrelated to what you're doing, but you're trying to get information and reframe that into useful information to solve your problem.
Excellent. I'm kind of aware that we're all probably suffocating in this room, so I'm going to just skip to my last question, which is really about the future and where things are going. I mean, we've spent the last 12 years now designing stuff on here, and it's starting to change now with AR, AI. VR hasn't really happened. Maybe it will. And things like voice interaction. Where do you see things going in the next few years, and what does that mean for the UX industry and UX skills?
Voice has been around for a long time. A lot of these actually has been around for a long time. It's been very scattered still. I think we're seeing leaps in selected areas, and that will mean changes to, I don't think it will, for me, I don't see massive changes in how we practice. And that's ultimately because the bulk of what we're talking about today was soft skills. And that's going to remain important. The user-centered design process as we know it, I've used it for 18 years. And it really has not, I used it from the command line to GUI, to cell phones, to touch screens, to AR now. Pretty much we're still applying the same rough methodology. It's a pretty robust methodology. If you look at it after 20, 30 years, it's still kind of intact. So that soft skill will stay. And the trick is to look at how we can apply this to these new technologies. These are technologies like how iPhone had come out before what we had our landlines. This is the next technology that's coming out. But for now, I think the methodology still, as a baseline, is still quite applicable.
I recently found something fascinating. It was it's called Mother of All Demos. Who saw Mother of All Demos? It's on YouTube. It's amazing.
It's fantastic. It's from decades ago.
Yeah. And when I watched that, I had a suspicion before I watched that. But when I watched that, I was like, and because most of you didn't saw that, so it's a guy doing a demo at Stanford, and they're demonstrating a system where he have an alternative way to input information with 5-keys keyboard and first mouse. He actually invented the mouse.
Douglas Engelbart.
Exactly. So I have terrible memory for names. So
everyone should Google it and watch it. It's great.
Yes. And there's also this YouTube and there's also a website, his family name.org, I think. And you can find like a structure with annotations and stuff. What I'm going down to is that at some point I realized the old stuff we're trying to implement was invented in the 60s and 70s, was built up on these mainframe supercomputers. We can find stuff we just get in 3 last years, like for example Figma and Sketch with symbols. Finally designers starting to use basic objective-oriented approach when we create symbols and we duplicate them and we have instances. And this way we can finally organize our workflow. And it's so funny because it was invented in 60s and 70s, right? I don't think we're making progress. I think what we do we're making cycles of adoption, right? My dream recently is to maybe finally implement what he's showing. And what he's showing is a computer system which is more about augmenting human intelligence than anything else. It's very flexible, it's very responsive, it's a companion, and the way you interact with this is very different from what we have even today. And it's very, very flexible in a sense that it's a one sandbox when everything you see is created within the sandbox. Unfortunately, what happened after that is that we have salad, it's ridiculous, but the way we had adoption of personal computer is software in a box. You buy Microsoft Word, and this is such a degradation from what we have in 60s and 70s when computer machine was thought as a continuation of your intelligence, not something degraded to one salad tool, Word, Excel. But these degraded tools, they were commercially very, very successful. They were successful in education. They were successful in dumping down technology to a point when people actually at mass can adopt it. What I think is happening recently is that a lot of the same ideas, collaboration on a cloud, together building something, sharing that without boundaries, I think this is very, very powerful. And I hope that our field will help to drive this. We need to have we need to be a little bit crazy to say hey, let's actually build word processor, Excel, and design tool in one, and let's code it on the same tool. I hope we will be going to see the emergence of Z-tool, right? Emergence of computers which are more like interactive environments when they create stuff, when there are no boundaries between apps, when apps are working together as one alive continuation of yourself. Yeah.
I guess I would add 2 layers. One is that while we're moving towards Internet of Things and robotics and bionic wear, and I mean, there's a lot going on in the future, at the end of the day, somebody still has to design this hardware. Somebody still has to design the technology. And like Alfreda said, this practice, this whatever you call it, this mindset is so critical in delivering the right ability to use something and the right ability to pick the right thing to deliver. That in terms of where we're heading and the obsolescence of what we do and so on, I don't think we're going down that path because somebody still has to design the robotics so that they work well. The other layer I would bring to it is when you look at any new technology that comes down the track, it goes to the sort of technology adoption curve. And right at the start, everything is about the platform and very little is about the intelligent, useful, humanistic application of that platform, right? So if you think of voice over IP, initially it was all about the technology. And nobody quite knew what to do with it. You know, how does this apply to humans? And it wasn't really until I think Viber was probably one of the first to pick it up, and then of course now there's Skype. So that's when the actual application started to become more important, and the technology, the platform itself, became less important because we brought that humanistic, that useful aspect to whatever the technology might be. So as new technologies come down, if you think about blockchain, right now it's like we're all talking about it, it's cryptocurrency, we're not, you know, what is blockchain and how do you use it and how do you apply it? It's all about the platform. It's probably about 90% about the platform, maybe 10% about the application of it. And right now it's about cryptocurrency. But the next wave is people thinking about what can we use the blockchain platform for to help humans' lives in whatever way, make it easier, faster, more efficient, more delightful, whatever. And that's where I think, let's call it the human experience, so we don't get stuck on terminology. That's where we can come to the table and start to really understand how can humans benefit from these new platforms, and what can we do about it, and then how can we deliver it, right? How can we deliver that solution?
I realized I was passionate about it a little bit and I forgot to mention a few things. I believe instrumental for this kind of tool. One of the things is that the way we interact with machines is still very artificial, right? So we have clicky buttons, we have like a mouse, or we have touch bar. And I think what is interesting, what is this tool could be is that it's more about convergence between touch, voice, contextual comments. One of the things that recently I started to kind of fantasize about is that what if I will point to an object and say what the computer needs to do with it, and what if the computer will recognize that? And I realized there's no reason why we don't have that. Like if you look into the current stack of iOS, you have a voice recognition on device. You can make this device constantly listening to you. You can build up this experience and have something closer to her when people are sitting in the office and chatting a little bit with machines, and machines actually listening. I explored this a little bit and found this very, very interesting direction. Not sure if it will happen, but we will see.
That's great. It's a pretty decent point to wrap up at least the panel. Has anybody got any questions or observations? Yeah.
Maybe Neil, why don't we let that the next part be more smaller groups, and then we can wrap it up here. You guys? Yeah. Yeah, I think we should wrap it up here and then smaller group. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll close it out there then. Thanks for coming, and thanks for everyone for joining. And if you want to ask,
sorry, just a quick thing. Hello? Yeah. On behalf of Accelerate, thank you again to all the panelists. I hope you all enjoyed that. I certainly learned a lot. Very much excited about what you just said, the future of user experience, and certainly sounds like even though the careers haven't changed much, there's a lot here for everyone to sort of glance through. A couple of questions from my side. Number one, who's interested in building a career in user experience? Who really wants to go and finds it very exciting to build a career in this as a junior UX person, eventually, like one of these people over here, rockstars? Yeah? Okay. Number two, which one of you guys works with an enterprise where you find it very hard to find user experience talent, people who have the mindset and not just the caps lock on their resumes. Yeah? Okay. And number 3, how many of you are part of enterprises where UX is really crucial, startups or otherwise, but the talent that you're finding right now may not really be at this sort of level? Yeah? Okay, cool. Well, on behalf of Accelerate, thank you again, and I think some of the panelists are going to be sticking around if you want to ask a few questions. The Accelerate team is also around if you have any questions for us. And I wish you all a wonderful evening and happy Labor holiday tomorrow.